All right, guys, it's Tuesday night. It's 9 o'clock. I wasn't here last week because it was my anniversary, and so my husband and I were in Nashville celebrating. Well, we weren't exactly in Nashville on Tuesday night, to be transparent, but it was my anniversary, and we had just got home from Nashville, so I wanted to be home. Excuse me. So I am super excited to be back here tonight because I wasn't here last week and I missed you guys. So tonight we are talking about marriage. Oh, how about that? You think I planned it or something? So welcome to ReLive. Thank you guys for joining us. This is my favorite time of the week where we talk about all the things. And tonight's topic actually came to me from a viewer. Wanted to talk about marriage and kind of how to keep things hot, how to keep the spark hot, I guess was the actual term she said. So tonight we're going to talk about just all things marriage, and I would love for you guys to comment in the comment box how long you've been married if you're watching, and comment with your questions tonight. So let me get to my script because I'm kind of jumping all around here. So tonight we have with us Laura Hawkins, who is a psychiatric nurse practitioner. She's also a nationally certified counselor, and she has graciously agreed to be here tonight to talk about marriage. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Laura has been married for 36 years. I mean, I feel like I have to say that because it gives her credibility, right? If you're going to talk about marriage, like you got to have a long-standing marriage there. So her husband is Stephen. Does he know you're doing this tonight? Does he know that we're going to talk about him?
I don't think he got that memo.
It'll be fine. They've been married for 36 years. And Laura owns her private practice called Olive Tree Place, where they do, psychiatric medication management and psychotherapy. She also has a background in Christian counseling and has been practicing as an advanced practice nurse for 15 years. And Laura works at Purdue School of Nursing. She teaches both in the School of Nursing undergrad and graduate programs. So that's actually how I met Laura. And I'm so excited that our paths crossed because it's perfect topic and perfect guest for tonight. So also I want to make sure you guys know that the stuff we're going to talk about tonight can be transferred to any relationship, whether you're married, whether you are in a committed relationship, whether you're single, your best friend, like all of these things that we're going to talk about, really you can find some meaning behind it to apply to your life. So it looks like we got some people commenting. We've got 13 years of marriage. Wow. 32.
Wow.
And 31. Thanks, guys. We got Jeff and Lori and Kimberly that have all commented. So thank you guys so much. I'm anxious to see what my parents comment. So Mom, Dad, if you're watching, I'm interested to see what your comment is for that. And there's a story behind that. So, all right. So let's get started with some marriage stuff. Are you ready, Laura?
Sure.
All right. So let's just hop in with this idea of keeping your marriage healthy. A lot of times you hear of people that are struggling, and marriage is not like, oh, it's so beautiful and wonderful all the time. It's not, you get married, you have the honeymoon phase, and the honeymoon phase kind of wears off. So how do you keep your marriage healthy? What are some good thoughts there?
Mm-hmm. So I've been thinking about this, and I think, part of it is cliche a little bit.
Okay.
But, time together, life comes at most of us pretty fast.
Okay.
And so even if it's not a ton of time, but I think the time every day to connect is important.
Right. Date nights, if you can schedule in those date nights.
Yeah. And you and I had talked before, and I think that, and one thing I said that, over 36 years, for so many of these years, we had 4 children. They were growing up in all kinds of activities, and we really didn't take the time to do very much date nights. It was expensive. You had to find a babysitter. But honestly, we've had so much fun now that they moved away, going out to dinner every Friday night. And if I had it to do over again, for young parents, I would say if I had to go back, I would take out a loan to go out on weekly date nights.
Oh, wow.
Honestly.
Okay, so
I think it's been really, just to have that time every week where you
Right.
can really connect
Right.
is really helpful.
So you can see how important she believes that is. So there are a lot of things you can do for date night that don't even cost a lot of money. And if you can find, I know a friend of mine, we swapped. So like 1 month we just did monthly every other month. So 1 month it was our month and she would watch our child. And the next month it was their month and we would watch her child. And so that's one way to help with the bank account. You can just swap those favors and then go to a park and walk around, or if it's cold, go to the mall and do something, just that time to stay connected. My husband and I have a fortunate kind of situation. We both work at Purdue, so we're able a few times a week to just that lunch hour, like get together and walk to McDonald's to get a drink. And I joke with people, I'm like, sometimes that's our only like 30 minutes of quiet time together. And I really think that helps. There was a time before that we both got up in the morning and worked out together. We were doing our own things, but we were both in the same room together and kind of, no social media, nothing, no electronics. So I think that is really important to spend that time together too. So the cliche stuff, guys, just what about conflict?
So, well, let me, conflict, I can say one thing is that the things that attract you to your spouse are probably going to be the things that create conflict later.
Oh, interesting.
It's like that characteristic is what actually attracts you to the person.
Okay.
And but then, when they do it all day long, then it
kind of drives you crazy, right?
Yeah.
And when you've been around it for 36 plus years.
Right.
Okay.
So sometimes I think when things annoy you, just daily things or little habits, just to remember, okay, what about that did I like?
Right, exactly. That's a good idea. That's something good to keep. So how do you what's a good way to handle conflict, whether it's something small or, I know some people that like to bottle everything up and just keep quiet. And then there's that one thing and it's like, maybe he left the coffee grounds in the coffee pot, but that sends you over the edge. But then it's not about the coffee anymore. It's about these 5 other things that happened in the week. So
I do think that, that's again a pretty common thing, but really important that if you're having a conflict to try to keep the conflict, talk about the item itself. If it's that day, don't bring in all those other things. In general, to have short accounts, or to not let a backlog of things go up that you don't talk through. And then one thing we had talked about before is that, people have different ways of going through conflict. And when people are in an argument, like if an argument flares up, by and large, one or both people have probably been triggered. Something has caused that incident to make them angry. And sometimes there's what we have called dragons sometimes, which is the wounds or the sensitive places. We all have things that we're sensitive about, that people can upset us about. And so a lot of that, is kind of understanding, trying to take a step back and understand, okay, what have I triggered in this other person and why are they reacting the way they are? But then even in terms of talking it out, that's really important. But with most couples, there's one member who can't rest until it's all settled. They really have the need to talk it out right now. And maybe they're an external processor. And very often then the other person is of a kind of person where it's like they can't really talk about it now. They need 24 hours to calm down and settle. So you end up, this person is over here who can't sleep because there's still things aren't right, and this other person who just can't approach it yet. And so, internal and external processors, most marriages have one of each. And so one way to handle that is that, when you recognize you're in a conflict, I think firstly just to kind of talk about it, I see we've got a conflict here. And if the person who, can't process it right now, if they're willing to maybe make an appointment for the next day, that's enough to keep the external processor then can, they can like, okay, tomorrow night at 7 p.m. they know they'll have that resolution because that's important.
Right.
And so,
And then they're taking all their notes and
right, and
what
then
they want to
the
say.
internal processor, then they can have the time that they need to actually think it through,
Sure.
and then to be able to come together. But I think to be able to talk it through and come to
Right.
an understanding is important.
Right. And I think too, just staying current with each other, having that time to connect and just knowing what's going on, because we get so busy in life and you're running kids here, you're doing this, or maybe you don't even have kids, but you each have your own activities, and just being able to stay current, I think, is really important too.
And I think don't let bitterness build up.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important.
That is really important, because that'll get
keep
you.
short accounts, right?
Okay.
Right.
So when you're saying keep short accounts, like don't be holding on to something that he did a month ago.
Yeah, don't hold grudges.
Okay. Just like talk about it at that point
Mm-hmm.
and get over it. And don't bring it back up. I think that is another interesting thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take a look here and see if anybody else. So we've got 18 years, 33, 2.5. You're still newlywed babies. All right. Keep the comments coming in, guys. This is a great topic. And if you have any questions, drop them in. We'd love to talk about those. So let's move on to this idea of, I got married when I was 25 years old. So I just gave my age away because we've been married 14 years. But when you get married, when you are young and you get married and you are able to sustain the marriage and you get down to 10 years, 15 years, 20, 36 years, you can't help but think those individuals have changed.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you work through that? How do you work through people that get married at 21, you essentially grow up together.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you work through that? Like, what are some things that you could do to make sure you can sustain that?
I think that, giving each other room for growth is really important. And that's one thing I can say for my husband is I've gone through all kinds of phases. I was 21 when we got married.
Okay.
He was 24. So we did figure it out together.
Okay.
And so in some sense, maybe it's easier to meld your lives together. You're not quite so set in your ways. But at the same time, everyone goes through phases where they're interested in different things, or having, wanting to try a different career. But I think just a general attitude of really supporting the other person's growth as a person. And if there's, like, I love this dream that you have to have this talk show.
Yes.
And,
Thank
you've got
you.
a supportive husband in the other room, which is
Yes.
awesome. And
Very
my
supportive.
husband's been very supportive of all the different, career paths I've gone down.
Right.
And you want to have that person in your corner. That's a lot of
Absolutely.
what you want to have in a marriage.
Absolutely. So what do you do if your spouse comes to you with an idea that you are totally not on board with, and you're like, this is crazy and I do not support it? Like, how do you have that conversation?
Well, it might depend on what it was.
Right.
But I would, I would try to keep an open mind.
Sure. Yeah, and know that if
it's like, let's go take our savings out and put it in the lottery, maybe that's not such a great idea, but
Right.
yeah, if they want to, try an entrepreneurial project, then you might have, usually one is more risk averse than the
Sure.
other. And so it might mean coming together for whichever one. It's like, are there things, that can help you feel okay with that project?
Right.
Maybe.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, you don't want to be the one to stand in the way of their dreams, right?
That's true.
So,
That's true. You got to be supportive. Let's talk about love languages, because I think there's a lot to be said about a love language. So there's 5 of them, and let's just talk. What's your thought behind love languages, and what do we need to know?
Yeah, I think it's a great concept, love languages, and I had when we were younger. And I think, my husband and I have learned to speak each other's languages over the years.
Right.
But, the love languages, it's a great book. It's information that's out there. And I think it is really helpful to understand how your spouse receives love. That's really important. The other thing that I think isn't always talked about, but also is important, is to whatever your spouse has a love language, and whatever that is, if you can learn to receive that as love,
Okay.
that's helpful. And our example was that my husband was often like fixing things around the house and repairing things, and it was great. Everything was always in great shape. But I sometimes missed him. It's like, well, where are you?
Right.
Like, I want to connect. I want to have long, deep conversations.
He's like, can you do it while I'm mowing the lawn?
So his love language was clearly acts of service.
Okay.
And then he would just act like it was such a big deal when I would cook a meal that he liked. And I would be like, yeah, no big deal, whatever. But that was his love language. And so, he's come a long way learning my love languages over the years, but it really made a big difference, especially early on, for me to understand and be able to receive his love language as love, even though it's like translation. It's like speaking a different language. Right. But I think that can really help.
That's really good. So I'm curious to know, do you guys know what your spouse's love language is? My husband and I did the test a long time ago, and I think we're on cue with what they are. So we'll see. Acts of service, I think, is his. I don't even know really what mine is. I'd have to think about it. It's definitely not receiving gifts. It's definitely not. Yeah, so I think that's really good. And then you also need to make sure you're filling each other's love tanks with their love language too, is how I've heard somebody else talk about it. So let's talk about a myth. If you guys watched the beginning of September, I had Dr. Susan Kersey on here, and we talked about myths of suicide. So I really liked kind of busting some of the myths. So I've got one myth tonight, and that is that you can totally marry the wrong person. So let's talk about that and how you believe that that's not a myth, or that is a myth because you feel like.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, if you've married a sociopath, you probably have married the wrong person, frankly.
Right.
But short of that, I think that, most people can find a way to make a life. And some marriages are definitely easier than others in terms of the personality blend.
Sure.
But I think that the things that can make a relationship work, can be worked out.
So then with that, you're thinking as long as they aren't a sociopath.
Semi-joking.
There's kind of a habitual affair,
right,
those types of things. I believe aren't there 3 A's, maybe adultery, alcohol, and abuse, or something like that, are the 3 A's that probably need to get out of that relationship. I don't know. That's kind of what I've heard before. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that you need to separate yourself physically if you're unsafe. Absolutely.
Right.
I think that if there are some relationships where you can't be healthy, if you find yourself being emotionally abused to the point that you've kind of lost who you are, and you've lost a sense of your boundaries, and that probably you need to be separate.
Okay.
Long-standing affairs are symptoms of a lot of other things. I think that I've seen marriages come back from affairs, and what I've seen be the key is it's really the heart of the people. It's is there humility? Is there a sense of whatever it takes, I'm willing to, because it takes personality change. It really takes some deep work when that's happened to be able to bring it back together. And I've seen it happen, but it takes a whole lot of commitment.
Yeah, I would imagine so for both parties.
Right. Well, the one
to not bring it up all the time.
Right,
and then the other one to be committed to not doing it again. Okay, so besides those things, adultery, abuse, being in an unsafe relationship, those things, we're talking about how you can't really marry the wrong person. And that marriage really is a commitment. It is a rock solid commitment that you make to each other, and you figure out a way, as you said, to make a life, but then he's just not making me happy. I'm just not happy. He's not making me happy. So I need to find somebody else that is going to make me happy. I feel like this is also another myth, right? Because
most of the time when that's the case, and there's some life phases where that can tend to happen, when it's hard, like in the midst of child rearing or kind of life phase changes. But Yeah, repeat that. Sorry.
So,
Past my bedtime.
wasn't it nice of her to come on past your bedtime?
Well, maybe not my bedtime, but my
No, it's
alert
okay to
time.
say, yeah,
Yeah.
no. He's not making me happy,
Oh,
so.
Yeah, there are marriages, and it makes me sad that break up because of that. And
Mhm.
many times what you see, you walk down the road 10 years and
Mhm.
they're in another relationship, but there are
Mhm.
similar interpersonal problems.
Mhm.
Because again, short of those big things, it's like
Mhm.
if you leave a marriage, and it takes two to engage,
Sure.
but you're still bringing you to that next relationship.
Absolutely.
And if you haven't fixed the underlying things
Mhm.
that are causing you to be unhappy here,
Mhm.
there's definitely no guarantee that the next guy or the next woman is gonna be
Right.
making you any happier than you are right now.
Right. You got to take a look at yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but like when you first get married, like you get married because you're fun to hang out with and you make me happy and you have this amazing life together. But then again, that's like before life has really started, right? Before it starts throwing all those things at you and you got to work through it. So,
right. That's very true.
That's why maybe individual counseling for somebody if you're saying like they don't make you happy. So, all right.
Yeah,
so my dad finally commented on how long they've been married. Married 17 years, 8 years divorced, and now we have been remarried. He says 16 years next month, but Dad, it's 15 years next month. I just celebrated my 14th. They got married 1 year before me. Okay. How about midlife crisis situations? What do you mean, Kristen? What do you mean tell us what you mean about midlife crisis situations, and then we'll come back to you, okay? All right, so we talked about that nobody can really make you happy, and it's a mistake to think that someone out there will make you still happy, that you're still you. You're going to take whatever it is that is not making you happy to another relationship. And also, let's talk about how love is a choice. Like, you have made that choice to love this person. And how do you talk about that a little bit? How do you do that? What is the common
Yeah, just think of love as, and it's a little bit about, are you making me happy?
Mhm.
And we hope that you will.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And there are happy times, certainly, but ultimately, yeah, it's a choice. It's a choice to be the kind of spouse that you would want the other person to be.
Oh, it's that golden rule, right?
Yeah, guess what?
That comes back around all the time. Okay, so when would you okay, first of all, let me back up. I'm sorry guys, I'm losing my train of thought. What is the biggest reason you start seeing couples for counseling?
I would say the biggest reason they come in is either affairs or pornography.
Okay, wow.
Those would be
okay. And do you think, let's get on a soapbox for a minute. Do you think social media has anything to do with that? I think it's grown since social media has.
So I think that what happens with social media is it has made it very easy to catch up with that high school flame or that person you knew in the past. And I think when people get lonely, when the person it's just not so romantic to be living life. And people have demands and expectations of you. But then there's that person out there who really gives you that unconditional regard and that respect that you're craving, without, and they're not the one who is fussing with you because you forgot to bring home the bread or something, And it's really easy. I think it's made it a little easier in that sense for affairs to happen. I'm not sure if it's made them more common. I don't know about that.
Well, I think if something is easier to access, it's probably going to happen more frequently. Same with pornography. You can go to the web and just
on online dating sites.
And do you see you probably see a problem with pornography in both males and females, but would you say it's more men, or would you say it's pretty equal?
It's a growing issue for women.
Interesting.
Much more than it used to be. I would say, in my experience, women are more hurt or bothered by their partner, being involved in pornography,
Yeah,
and vice versa.
I would imagine. Okay, did Kristen get back with us? She did. She says, like, I hear a lot of women who have husbands that just flip and become very selfish and decide they don't want to be married, distance themselves, and spend a lot of unnecessary money on unnecessary toys. Hey, Mom, I'm glad you finally figured out how to comment. That's awesome. We're only episode 7, so I'm really proud of you. So maybe husbands that just decide all of a sudden, I don't want to be married anymore, and they just want to walk away. That sounds like it's hard to.
Yeah, I think, it really happens. We know, it's a cliche, but these things really happen. And I think, men hit a point in life where they start, and it's really part of normal development, where you start asking the questions of, is this life what I want? Maybe I'm hitting 50. It's like I'm not going back. And I think there's a time for all of us as we get older. It's like, it's life isn't out there in the future anymore. You really kind of realize, okay, this is what it is, and coming to a point of accepting that. And if they felt frustrated, maybe career, if they haven't had things that kind of give them an inner strength, that they can feel satisfied about maybe their contribution to the world, I think it's very easy to fall into that. And sometimes it's you've really pulled together for a bunch of years, you've raised the children, and all of a sudden here you are at the other end of that, and what do you do? And I think, for every marriage is that phase of, okay, what are we after we are focused on getting everybody to soccer practice every night?
Right.
And yeah.
So I'd imagine that having those date nights and staying current and having those real conversations and still having fun together would help try to surpass that midlife crisis, because you are, you're still a unit.
Yeah, I think keeping the connection is really helpful. I mean, you might. I mean, there still may be some form of crisis that people go through, and you might need to let them buy a car too.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's just to realize. I think it is a common thing as you age. It's like I think of the old Erickson stages. Generativity versus stagnation. I mean, there's a real question there.
Okay.
As we age, it's like, is this what I expected?
Okay.
And accepting what's different.
Okay.
Finding, what is my satisfaction in life? Maybe rethinking, what am I about? What are my spiritual roots?
Interesting. I've not heard that before. But that leads really well into kind of our next couple of topics here. And that is, how do you stay connected during the childhood years, and how do you survive them? Because you are now in the empty nest stage, right?
Yeah.
And you've told me it's been lovely, and you even alluded to that earlier. So how do you get there? Not that you want to rush things along, but how do you just stay connected, I guess, and stay in love and all of that while you're raising a child? It can be difficult. Like, my husband and I only have one child, and he can control our time. I couldn't imagine having multiple children, and how you can, you had 4, you said?
We did.
How do you work through that? What do you do?
So, it just comes to mind, I think having a sense of humor for one thing.
Okay.
Trying to keep perspective. I think, when you're in the thick of all that, it feels like it will always be there, and then you blink. That's also cliche.
Right.
It's kind of true.
It is true.
So, but I really think it comes back to just getting that time together to still be who you are. Sometimes I think there's a lot to be said for managing stressors. I have an awful lot of people come to me that are really, that are raising special needs children and working full time and going to school and, taking care of their mother or, any number of things. And when you look at it from the outside, that's just not a realistic life. And so I think if you're really finding yourself completely disconnected, one thing you can do is just look at your life and maybe even have a trusted friend or relative say, is this a realistic expectation? We all need some downtime, some away time, just time to rest. And I think, our culture is so busy, so pressed and stressed. I think that's a big issue.
Right. So maybe having some type of mentor that you can go to.
That can be helpful.
Okay.
But just, kind of overall managing your stresses. I mean, if you're finding yourself at your end,
okay.
Is there a way you can readjust the family,
Yeah, absolutely.
Finances, jobs.
Right. There's so many things because you bring two lives together to live under one roof and you've got all these things going on and raising kids and
so simplifying when that's possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Trying to have dinner together, but that's not always a realistic thing, right?
Well, it's really hard during the sports seasons, but I do think supper together for a family is one of the most important things you can do to create a sense of
with no electronics.
Oh yeah, that was always a cardinal rule at our house for sure.
With no electronics. Like sometimes
absolutely.
If we tell Liam to turn the phone off, it's like,
yeah.
Okay, what other questions do you guys have? Come on, I know you guys have questions about marriage. Have you ever counseled a couple that got divorced and then remarried each other?
I think that I'm trying to go through the Rolodex. I think I've definitely talked to people who had been remarried. I'm not sure. I didn't necessarily walk through that, but
okay,
that remarried each other.
That's what my dad was alluding to. They were divorced for, I don't know, what do you say, 8 years, and then they remarried each other. So that's a really cool topic.
That is cool.
I think he said maybe they're going to be on next week. I don't know.
That'd be awesome.
So yeah, we'll see. I'll have to talk to them. So I think we've talked a lot about, I think we've talked about a lot of good things tonight. And I just want to go over my notes and make sure we hit everything. Do you have any overall tips for marriage to close us out tonight? Any, I don't know your partner's love language. Be ready to receive it as love to you. What else? Fight fair.
That's a good one. Yeah. Well, so this just comes to mind because we have this little saying at our house, and we just say communication is overrated, and that is just because we have pretty much opposite communication styles.
Oh, okay.
But we kind of laugh about that because it's the fact that you really can make it work, even though you have opposite communication styles. At the times you can still be friends. But
so definitely communicate, even if you're communicating in a style that they don't quite understand.
Keep trying.
Right,
absolutely. Persistence.
Absolutely.
I think persistence is probably
persistence and knowing that you're in it for the long haul and that you can get through just about anything. I think we covered quite a bit tonight. Any lasting questions from the audience? No? Oh. Different levels of libido.
Okay, well, that's very
That's
common.
something just somebody asked.
Uh-huh.
Any thoughts on how to deal with different levels of libido? I knew this topic was going to come up before we closed out tonight.
Yeah. So this is almost always the case. Really common. I won't say almost always. That's probably overstating it a little bit. But, it's almost always the man who has more desire than the female. And, what I really talk to them about, I mean, for one thing, consider, and I guess this would be a message to probably the husbands out there who may or may not be watching, but, if you want somebody to want to have sex with you, don't tell them they're fat.
Oh.
And don't be critical of them.
Right.
Don't be frustrated with them because, this is a generalization, but for most females, there's a real, if you want there to have, to have some action there, it's the emotions.
Absolutely.
It's the connection. It's feeling heard. It's feeling felt. It's feeling wanted in an emotional sense. And that's just a real physiological difference between men and women, which is pretty obvious because most men don't care if they're having a fight or not. If someone suggests that let's have sex, let's do it.
Right.
For most women, it's not that way at all.
Right.
And so I think that's really, it's almost like the love language thing. It's like Mars and Venus. And to just, for the one who has the greater libido, to kind of really research and understand what kind of situation your spouse needs in order to want to go there.
Right.
And it might be, if she's, got a couple of toddlers and working and it's just pure exhaustion.
Right.
And I think there can be a lot of offense taken when it's really just biology or it's just the stress of life.
Right.
That are, and if you're a mom of young children and you've had people crawling on you all day, it's like the thought of physical contact may be the last thing you want.
Right.
So I think it's a communication again, but I think,
absolutely,
for the spouse to understand there's a whole emotional side that goes along with this, and if you take care of that, then the other usually takes care of itself.
So tell me I'm pretty and do the laundry.
There you go. Sure.
Awesome.
Short version. Exactly.
Yeah. Tell me I'm pretty and take out the trash. No, I don't know. All right, guys. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here tonight. I think next week we might have a couple special guests on. So you are not going to want to miss that. I'm just telling you right now, you're not going to want to. So not tomorrow night, next week, 9 p.m. We'll see you then. Thank you so much, Laura, for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Good night, guys.